Greetings, my name is Erik Anderson. I am the inventor and owner of the Orion scoring system, and you are joining us today for our webinar on our new mobile app for iOS and Android devices. This mobile app is designed for two types of users, athletes and match officials, and we are going to be talking about the different features that we have built into the app for the athletes and match officials today. Let's go ahead and get started. Today's agenda, we're going to be covering 6 different items. First, installing the application, which will include registering a user account. Second, linking match participants to the app. This is important because, for example, if you are an athlete, we want to make sure that we send your scores to your account. Third, we're talking about one of the most important features of the app, which is being able to get your scores if you're an athlete within the app. We built in lots of different ways for athletes to do that. Fourth, a very cool feature that we built in also for athletes, which is score history, being able to view your scores over time. During the pages a little bit, our next subject will be about support that we've added in for range officers and statistical officers. And then finally, support that we added in for scoring large target format targets. We just got back from Camp Perry a couple years ago, and where Orion was using the app to score all of the national matches for 3-position and prone. First up, let's talk about installing the application. The app is available in both the iOS and Android stores, the Apple Store and the Google Play Store. It is free for all users. There is no separate licensing fee for the app. And if you go to the store to install it, you do have to search for the phrase Orion scoring system. If you just search for the phrase Orion, you're not likely to find it. You can find something else. So search for Orion scoring system and make sure that you see the famous icon, the famous Orion icon. Once you have the app installed on your mobile device, you do have to create an account. You have to register an account. To do so, we need a few pieces of information from you, first name, last name, and your email address. Once you have created this account, we're going to send you an email just to verify your email address is indeed correct. So after you create the account, please check your email. There will be a email from us. Click on the link just to verify that this is indeed your email address. And then fourth, we also want to make sure that you are 13 years old or older. The app was not designed for users under this age. With that said, though, we do recognize that there are going to be users, athletes, under the age of 13 who will want to use the app to view their scores. Most likely BB gun users who start at the age of 8. So we did build in a mechanism to allow users under the age of 13 to create an account and to use the app. But we require a parent, legal guardian's permission. We do believe that it is the parent's right to decide whether or not their children under the age of 13 can use the app. So if you are under the age of 13, you create an account. The very first thing that we are going to do is ask for your parents' email address. We will send them an email of which they can decide whether or not to permit permit their child to use the app. Next, let's talk about linking match participants within the Orion desktop software to their user account within the Orion mobile app. This section is largely intended for statistical officers who will be using Orion to run practices and competitions. I want to first bring up a very important concept that we have that we call the shared responsibility. In order for a match to run smoothly, regardless if it's a practice or competition, we each have a role to play to make sure that the match does run smoothly. We here at Orion, we are responsible for a couple of things. First and foremost, we take this very seriously. We want to make sure that the Orion software works correctly. That is our responsibility. And we will push out updates to the software, often with bug fixes, about once a month. It is also our responsibility to make sure that Orion is properly documented. If you haven't noticed, over the last 6 months, we have been spending a lot of time updating our documentation, making it better, making it easier for you to find information about how to use Orion. And third, what we're doing right here today, as an example, is it is also our responsibility to help teach you how to use Orion. Now, it is your responsibility to learn, but it is our responsibility to help teach you. As match officials, as statistical officers, you are responsible for a number of things as well. First, how to properly configure Orion. Over the next couple of slides, you'll see quite a few examples as to different options you can provide different users of what they can see within the app. Next, you are responsible for making sure that your Orion, your desktop software, is kept updated. Again, we make updates about once a month, and in almost all cases, we recommend that you keep your version of Orion updated. It is also your responsibility to know the rulebook. Orion doesn't replace the statistical officer. Orion is a tool for the statistical officer. It is still your responsibility to know how to adjudicate everything within a competition. And of course, you are responsible for using Orion correctly. Just like any other piece of software, if you put bad data in, you're going to get bad data out. All right, so let's talk about how do we enable mobile app integration. 10 years ago, when we came out Orion, one of the first things that we did, which was a breakthrough at the time, was to allow any and every match that you created, you the users created, to have an online listing. It amuses me to this day that there are still other ESD manufacturers out in the world who are playing catch up to us, who have 20 times the development staff as we do. We made this very, very easy to do. Quite literally, at the time, all you had to do was put a check box and your results would be uploaded to the web. We made it just as easy to integrate with our new mobile app. And it's in the same place as it was before. In Match Properties, under the Result Center tab, you now have an option at the top to enable the integration. Under that tab, you have 3 different choices. Do not upload scores and allow public access, upload scores and allow only athletes to view their scores. These first 2 options should be familiar to anybody who has been using Orion for a while. Do not upload scores, which we call private. The private settings basically means nobody sees anything. Scores are not listed publicly. They're not listed with the mobile app. The only way that you can get scores with a private match is if you print them out. The second option, which again should be familiar to anybody who uses Orion, is what we call public, which allows everybody to see everything. So this is most likely your competitions that you run. You would set to public access so people can see the results both online and now within the mobile app. And then third, this is a new setting that we call protected. This is largely intended for practices. In a practice, you don't want your results to be publicly available. That's just inappropriate. But you do want your athletes to see how they shot in their practice. So this third option, again we call it protected, allows athletes to view their scores within the mobile app. And of course, to make sure that the competition runs correctly, to make sure the practice runs correctly, match officials can also view scores, view squatting within the app as well. Also, before I go on to the next slide, I do want to encourage everybody to take a moment to review our privacy policy. What I just described is a kind of a highlight of it. If you read our privacy policy, you'll get much more detailed information about how we're using the information that you provide within Orion. Within the Orion desktop software, to link a user's account within the user's mobile accounts to their scores is done through the Match Participant tab. Again, people who are familiar with Orion will know that each row in the Match Participants tab refers to an athlete or range official in the match. And now you will see columns with the different roles that the participant can have. We'll go over the details of the roles in a moment, but it's largely separate between athletes and match officials. Now, to link their accounts, you have to use their email address. This is the email address that they use when they registered for the mobile app itself. Under the email column, type in their email address. And you'll know that the link has successfully been made because the background of that cell will go from gray, which means it's not linked, to yellow, which means that it is linked. That link happens, it does a check for two things. One, it makes sure that this is a valid email address within the mobile app. And two, it makes sure that the last name matches. This will prevent you from accidentally assigning the wrong email address to the wrong athlete. Again, the last name also has to match. All right, so let's talk about the different roles that you can assign to each user. And depending on the role, you see different things within the app itself. The most common one is going to be athlete. Athletes are going to be able to see their scores, they're going to see their registration information, and they are going to be able to see their squatting information. So kind of a neat feature is the athlete, they roll up to a competition and they can open up the app, and even before they step inside, they know what firing point they're on. Next up is a coach. I will admit, currently speaking, we do not have any special features for a coach within the mobile app. This role is more meant just within the Orion desktop software currently. Next, range officer. As the name implies, this is somebody who is helping to manage the range during a practice session or a competition. They do have special privileges. They can view all the squatting, and they can also create incident reports, which is something we'll talk about in a couple of slides. And then there are statistical officers. A statistical officer has all of the roles a range officer does, plus one, which is namely they are allowed to update registration information through the app as well. And then we also have a special category that we just call registration, which just gives a user the ability to update registration information, last name, first name, etc. Within the app. Once you have linked the app, again within the Orion desktop software under the Match Participants tab, that requires the email address and last name to match up. Inside of the app itself, the athlete, the range official, if they did a go to the home screen, do a pull down to refresh, they would be able to see the app. Of course, make sure you are on the correct date, but once that link occurs, you'll be able to see the match within the Orion desktop software, within the Orion mobile app, and they will be able to open up the match and see the scores. Next, let's turn our attention to one of the most important features of the mobile app, which is allowing athletes to be able to view their scores. Again, if you are in a protected or public match, an athlete will always be able to see their scores. Now, if you are a spectator and you open up a match, if it's a public match, you'll be able to see the result lists as well. So let's talk about all this. As mentioned a couple slides ago, once a link has been made for an athlete and their user accounts, they can open up the mobile app on the home screen of the app, do your pull down to refresh, and they will be able to see any matches that they are shooting that particular day. Once you click on that match, you open up to what we call the match home screen. Now, the information you see on the match home screen will be dependent on a couple of factors. One, who you are. Again, if you are an athlete, you will always be able to see your results and your registration for any particular match, regardless if it's public or protected. What day it is. As an example for here, we have a feature called live results, and live results are only available the day of the match. There's no need to be showing live results once the match is over. And then third, the type of match. Again, I'll use the example of if it's a protected match, an athlete will always be able to see their personal scores. If it's a public match, however, a athlete, spectator, everybody would be able to see their scores plus all scores from anybody else in the match itself. We knew going into developing the mobile app that being able to see your scores is going to be the most important feature of the app. So we built in lots of different ways for an athlete to see their scores. First off, on the match home screen, there is a block that will list your scores, both for the aggregate of the match as well as for each stage. And underneath that, you will have the option to view your target images. Just like you can online or through the printed individual score sheets, you have a digital representation of your shot group. Back on the home screen of the app, there is a scores tab that will also let you see the scores. And then in the app itself, if it's a public match, when you view the result lists, for each, both the individual, the aggregate event, as well as for each stage, you will be able to see your scores if you're an athlete for that match. Viewing results, this is specific for public matches. We have two different types of results that you can look at. The first we call live results, and this is, if you're familiar with the leaderboard scoreboard we have on our online system, this is very analogous to it, just with the mobile app. It is a ranking of athletes based on their average shot fired at that time. You can view both the leaderboard for a particular event, or you can actually watch a particular athlete and to see how they're doing. This is both for their scores and their target images. Very neat feature to use during the competition. Second, we have traditional result lists built within the app. Again, the result lists that you are familiar with online, we have those built into the app itself. And again, it does have to be a public match, but you'll be able to see everybody's scores and to see their target images, just like you can with our online system. And just to get everybody excited, we will be coming out with push notifications soon, allowing, so if you're an athlete, we will send you automatically your scores for each stage of the match. Next, let's talk about my favorite feature of the mobile app, which is a feature we call score history. This allows an athlete to view his or her scores within the app graphically over time. Now, in order to create this feature, we had to deal with the giant diversity of the sport. Just as an example of what we had to deal with is in the United States, we have three different major governing bodies, the CNP, NRA, and USA Shooting. And then we have air rifle shooting, which is for the, broken down between sporter and precision. We have small bore rifle, which is broken down between international and conventional. We have high power rifle, where we have disciplines of surface rifle and bolt action. The list just goes on and on and on and on. It's quite honestly a bit mind-numbing. So in order to deal with this, we created event styles. So when you use the score history feature in Orion, what you're doing is you're actually viewing your scores for a particular event style. Some examples to give a more concrete idea what this are. BB gun is an example of an event style. Sporter 3-position air rifle, probably the most common one, is an example of an event style. International, or sometimes called precision air rifle standing, is another example. And within that, there are what we call stage styles. And these correspond to the different stages that you would expect within a competition. Again, I'll go back to my example of BB gun. There are 4 stage styles associated with BB gun, corresponding to prone, standing, sitting, and kneeling. So again, when you view score history within the app, you are actually viewing your scores for a particular event style. And score history is very simple, as I just said. You access it from the home screen of the app under the Scores tab, and you can open it up, and you can see your scores over time. It will list both the specific scores you've had on a specific day, and it will also list a running average. That green line that you see in this example is the athlete's running average. So a very cool feature, and it's something that we plan on expanding on over the next couple months. So far, we have been talking about features of the app relating to athletes. Let's turn our attention now to the features that we've built into the app for match officials, both range officers and statistical officers. Now, if you are a range officer, one of the most important pieces of information that you need to know is who is shooting where. We call that the squatting list. Traditionally, the squatting list is printed out and handed out, and it's a giant mess. We can do better. Inside of the app, you have access to the complete squatting list for everybody in a match. Now, the squatting is assigned inside the Orion desktop software, but you can view it within the mobile app. And we have 3 different views for you: by relay, by firing point, and by name. Squatting list, we do consider it to be publicly available, so if it's a public match, everybody can see it. If it's a protected match, only the range officer can see it. And athletes, regardless, can always see their squatting from the match homepage. The next feature we have is the registration update. This allows, a very simple example, if somebody's last name is spelled incorrectly, before the app, you had to go to the Orion desktop software and you had to, interrupt the stat officer to get the name corrected. Not so anymore. For privileged users, these are the statistical officers and people with a registration role, they can actually update a athlete's name within the app, or even update particular attributes. So again, an example, if you're in a 3-position air rifle match and an athlete is listed as a sporter shooter, but they're really shooting precision, somebody with a registration role can actually update that in the app, and that will get reflected within the Orion desktop software. And then we also have a digital incident report feature. For those of you who may not be familiar, an incident report is they're filled out by range officers or jury members about something weird that happened during a competition. The most common one is probably crossfires, if an athlete crossfired onto another role, but it can also be other pieces of information. If an athlete saved a shot, they didn't fire all 20 shots in a 20-shot stage, or if they know that they had an extra shot fired. These are all examples of incident reports that, up until now, you had to put down on a piece of paper and hand over to the statistical officer. No more. With Orion, we now have digital incident reports that you can create in the app, and then they get displayed within the Orion desktop software. To submit an incident report, again, this is specific for the range officers. You first find the particular athlete. You do that through the squatting list. You would then say, hey, I want to create a new incident report. Select the stage. In this very simple example, we have kneeling, prone, or standing. And then there will be a list of what we call common incident reports. The incident reports that are most likely to occur. You can select one of those or select a custom incident report if it's not listed. Once you have your information filled out, that is digitally sent to the Orion desktop software. With incident reports, the range officer is allowed to create it, but the incident report is only closed by the Orion desktop software. So the great feature for this, for range officers, when something unusual happens during a match, they can submit it within the app, which allows them to do what they should be doing, which is spending more time on the range versus trying to track down the statistical officer. Finally, let's talk about Orion's new feature that allows it to score large format targets. Now, a large format target is quite simply anything that is physically too big to fit through a commodity scanner. For many of you who have been using Orion for a long time, you know that Orion targets, the air rifle, small rifle targets, they are designed, they're shrunk to be able to fit through a commodity scanner. But there are a number of targets out there that just are physically too big that we can accommodate that. The ones I have listed up here are the ones we currently support. The outdoor rifle small bore targets, including the conventional targets, as well as the rimfire sporter target. Here is a complete list of the targets that we support, and yes, we do have plans to expand on this list. Probably the most commonly asked one would be the 300-meter rifle target reduced for 100 yards, as well as the 25 and 50-yard pistol targets. So how does it work? First, the range officer, after the targets are shot, comes up to the targets in the field and takes photographs of the target. Those images are transmitted via the internet to Orion. Orion will download the target, reconstruct it, and then score it. So, sounds simple, right? Well, it's actually not that easy. There's a lot of stuff that goes on that, as a user, you should be aware of. First part is security. We only want to give range officers the permission to take the target images. And you do that, again, with the Orion desktop software, assigning the users the appropriate role within the Match Competitors tab. The next problem we have is camera lens distortion. Now, these mobile phones that we all use, their cameras in there are great for taking vacation photographs. They're great for taking photographs of your child's 10th birthday. They're not great for taking photographs involving 10th of a millimeter accuracy for scoring. And the big reason for this is that every camera has distortion. No matter how good of a camera you have, they're going to have some amount of distortion. And this is a big problem if we don't counteract it. Now, thankfully, there are some mathematical processes out there that can measure a camera lens distortion and remove it from an image that the camera takes. This is a two-part process. The first thing we have to do is measure that distortion. And we do that through a process known as calibrating. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the specific process because it is detailed, but for those of you who do plan on using the Orion mobile app to take photographs to score large format targets, calibration is a process you have to go through. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of detail over it, but you take a series of photographs of what we call a calibration board, and then those images are imported into Orion, and then Orion will measure that distortion, which later can be used to subtract out the distortion before scoring. The next problem we have is how do we assign targets to an athlete? Again, for those of you who have been using Orion for a while, you know that the typical method for doing this is using barcode labels. We have a similar item for the large targets that we call larger barcode labels, which are actually, they print off QR codes. And it contains the same basic information, the athlete, the stage, the series number. A second way, and this is purposely meant to be redundant, is the app is aware of the squatting and the stage order. So as a range officer, when you go down to take photographs, it will know that if you're taking photographs for firing point number 5, who is on that firing point and the type of target it is. That information is transmitted along with the image to Orion. So again, two different ways to assign targets to an athlete for large format targets. There's a bit of an art to taking photographs of the target as well. First, they must be really flat. This starts with the athletes when they hang the target. If there are warps in the target, that can affect the final product. First thing, athletes, if you're listening, make sure you hang your targets flat. Second, for the range officers, you want to make sure that you're taking the photograph as square as you can to the target. The next issue is lighting. We do recommend that the targets be photographed in the field. Outdoors, we have very good lighting. If you try to take the photograph of targets indoors, you have poor lighting. 2000 lux is the minimum that we have set. As comparison, even a well-lit indoor room, you're at most going to have 500 lux, well below the minimum that we have. So again, we recommend range officers taking the photographs in the field, outdoors, where there is good lighting. Then there is the target reconstruction process. A range officer, when they are taking photographs of the target, no matter how good they are not going to be able to line up the target perfectly. There's going to be some angle involved in that. And that's okay, because we expect that. And if you see the image on the left-hand side here, there is a diamond. We call that the alignment shape. And what that is actually that diamond has 4 known points on the edges. And we use that to reconstruct the image to create a bird's eye view. And that reconstruction process, not only does it create that bird's eye view, but it also subtracts out the distortion that we use from the camera calibration process that was done earlier. Once the image is reconstructed, that is what Orion uses to score. And finally, there are some increased requirements for your for the system. The Orion desktop itself, it needs a 64-bit version of Windows. Windows 10 is recommended. 32-bit version does not work with this process. You need Wi-Fi on the range, or at least a high-speed internet access. And the mobile phone itself has to at least have an 8-megabit camera. Thankfully, pretty much any camera that you have purchased, any phone that you've purchased in the last couple of years would have that. I know I quickly went through those slides. Not everybody's going to be using the app for large format scoring, but for those of you who plan on doing so, I do encourage you to go to our support site and to view our documentation on the entire process. Before I wrap up, I do have one additional slide I want to put out here, specifically for those of you who may be developers. We are developing a REST API that will allow programmatic access to Orion's data. Their public data, I should say. If you're a developer and you are interested in using this REST API, please get a hold of us and we can assist you in your application development. With that, I thank you for your time today. After today's webinar, if you have additional questions, a couple of different ways that you can get a hold of us by phone or by email. And again, we have our support website that takes you through all of this information and a lot more that you can view at your leisure. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day.